I think here in the Bay Area where we live, we consider ourselves pretty lucky, Middlecoff. We've seen what a polarizing quarterback can do for content in Derek Carr, and Jimmy Garoppolo's become another one.
Guy, you could even rewind. Kaepernick, before that, Alex Smith. I mean, we've had a decade-long run of some craziness.
It's a tried and true formula, and we're going to talk about Jimmy and what his next year under Kyle Shanahan could look like. Before we do that, reminder: I'm Guy. That's John. This is our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. We appreciate that.
Also, check out the podcast below in the description. We also posted on the YouTube.
All right. So a guy that we love, covers the 49ers for the Chronicle, Eric Branch, did a mailbag, John, and somebody asked him about Jimmy Garoppolo and the step he needs to take this year. And one of the things Eric wrote was Garoppolo will improve if he has a second full season in Shanahan's offense. See Matt Ryan 2016. So we're going to go back and look at second years in Kyle Shanahan's offense for a few quarterbacks. I guess the first thing we have to address, John, is do we consider this the second year for Jimmy Garoppolo if he plays 16 games in Kyle Shanahan's offense? It's his fourth year on the team.
Yeah, he'd been here a little while, but it's his first year. That was his first year of his career as a full-time starter, right?
Yeah.
He had been on the Patriots for 3.5 years, played in 2 games. The Niners, remember, they acquire him. He doesn't even play right away, which turned out to be the right decision. Starts those 5 games. And then the most hyped season in years since Harbaugh, the second Jimmy year, he tears ACL game 3 at Kansas City.
Right.
So we had to wait a long time for the full Jimmy Garoppolo experience. And while the numbers, and we'll dive into it, were polarizing, the team success, to me, kind of overshadowed the polarizing nature sometimes on other television and shows and everything, because they went 13-3. They went to the Super Bowl. God, They had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they were manhandling the prolific Chiefs offense.
They had 2 interceptions against Patrick Mahomes until they weren't. Yeah.
So I guess one thing about this video is, yes, there are things that are different between all the guys we're going to go through. And Robert Griffin III, there's 3 quarterbacks that Kyle Shanahan has coached back-to-back years. Because his 4 years in Washington, Kirk Cousins, here's a newsflash, Kirk Cousins was never his full-time starter in Washington. Even though it feels like he's like Coach Kirk Cousins since Pee Wee football, the way we talk about him.
Feels like it's his son, It's like, you're right. He never really played for him. And
Can you name the 3?
When you say the RG3, the 2 back-to-back years was coming off an ACL, and it was over.
It was very weird.
Started.
Yeah. Year 2 was very weird. Year 1 was great. Trivia question for everybody watching, John. The 3 predominant full-time starters that Kyle Shanahan coached in Washington were RG3.
Donovan McNabb.
Yes. Sexy Rexy. Rex
Ryan?
Rex Grossman. Oh. All right. So normally this is where we go into the film room, John. We're going to go into the stat room and flashback some memories. Speaking of controversial quarterbacks in the Bay Area, Matt Schaub was not controversial when he was a Raiders quarterback. It wasn't good. But this is about his 2 years under Kyle Shanahan. 2008 is at the top. 2009 is at the bottom. You can see the completion percentage and all the numbers by and large increased slightly. Now, the raw touchdown interception numbers, ignore those in year 1 because he only started 11 games in year 1. But the interception percentage identical, the touchdown percentage slightly up, the completion percentage slightly up. Anything stands out to you about Matt Schaub? Anything to address here?
Well, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a more talented player than Matt Schaub. But I do think there are some parallels that the Falcons, who drafted Matt Schaub in the second round, traded him to the Texans. Remember, This was before the Michael Vick kind of debacle. And they flipped first-round picks. They gave a second-round pick. It was probably a stronger just trade to get him than it was for the 49ers to get Jimmy Garoppolo. Though I think people would argue if Belichick had just been like, Jimmy's available, kind of like the Falcons did, and the best team or the best offer would land him, I think Jimmy would have netted them more than whatever it turned out to be, like pick one in the high 30s, right? It might have got them like 2-2s, or because a lot of teams wanted the player. But just as the individual player in a vacuum, I would take the the guy the Niners acquired and what we've seen over that version of Matt Schaub in 07, 08, 09, right?
Yeah.
Just the physical characteristics.
But
The league was a little different,
but
but
you're right.
he
It
was a
was
productive player.
it was a big trade at the time.
Here, you want me to read it to you? Atlanta and Houston will flip-flop first-round picks. Atlanta will receive Houston's second-round pick in the 2007 and 2008 draft.
Wow. And what were their? Does it say what their firsts that they flipped were?
The Houston has the number 8 pick in the first round, while Atlanta slotted 10. So it wasn't the flip was just two
But
slots,
still 2 twos.
And 2-2. A flip of the first round and 2 twos was dramatically more compensation than Jimmy Garoppolo,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes. Wow. Okay, so look, the Schaub, it's a long time ago. Like you said, the league's changed, blah, blah, blah. But you see some slight increases. The Schaub is going to, his numbers are going to become more relevant once we look at Matt Ryan and Jimmy Garoppolo. So Matt Ryan had 2 years under Kyle Shanahan. This is 2015, and then the Super Bowl year, 2016. You can see his completion percentage the first year, identicals to Schaub's. His interception percentages first year, identical to Schaub's. Year 2, the completion percentage goes up, the touchdowns double in percentage, and the interceptions get cut in half by percentage, and the yards go way up. And obviously that offense, I mean, there's a significant difference probably between those Falcons offenses and these Niner offenses, right? Really the teams, not the offenses.
Well, and I misspoke. I called Matt Schaub a second-round pick. He was a third-round pick. I do think the Matt Ryan,
out of Virginia,
the category that he falls in, right? He had, before Kyle had gotten there, Kyle arrives in 15. Matt Ryan had already made 3 Pro Bowls. And remember, a Harbaugh team beat him in the NFC Championship game where they hosted the NFC Championship game. He was a top 5 pick. He had been a really productive player. To me, his story is a lot different than Jimmy and Matt Schaub's, right? So him ultimately winning an MVP, given where he was drafted, given some of his previous success, I think when you look back, it feels a little weird in 2020. But at the time, it was just it's not as crazy. And I think this is what's crazy about Jimmy Garoppolo is that he's clearly more physically gifted than Matt Schaub. That's not even an argument. While Matt Ryan is taller, I would say Jimmy has a better arm and is definitely more mobile. Now, when the dust settles, is Jimmy Garoppolo a better player? I think we could argue now if he gets Kyle Shanahan for the next 5 or 6 years, well, Kyle's going to be here. Well, Jimmy, right? I think he's got a chance to. Matt Ryan's made 4 Pro Bowls and won an MVP. Is it crazy that Jimmy Garoppolo could start going to some Pro Bowls? I don't think it is at all. I mean, Jeff Garcia rattled off Pro Bowls back in the day as a Niner quarterback, and I'd say Jimmy's equally as talented, right? And now they got him some receivers. He's got a star tight end. I just don't know. The number that really jumps out to me with Matt Ryan, I don't know about you guys, is the 7 picks. And I don't view Jimmy Garoppolo as like a 7-pick guy. If he ever becomes like a 7 or below pick guy, they have a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the NFL, right?
Yeah, but I would also say, what we're looking at right there is Matt Ryan's best, right? 2 years later in 2018, he was 35 touchdowns, 7 picks. But those years are slight outliers. He's had 6 years with 28 touchdowns or more, but by and large, he's been a 12 to 14 with a couple. He had a 16 and a 17 interception year, but he's a 12. He's a 13 interception guy. He's a 28 and 13, I would say, quarterback by and large. Just looking
and the Falcons don't go to the playoffs consistently.
Well, but this is one of the big differences between the two teams, right? Are the Falcons in the Super Bowl if he's not a 38 and 7 guy?
No, not at all, right? Because the Niners cruise control to the Super Bowl with Jimmy. What do you have? 8 completions in the NFC Championship game. He didn't have to do much in the Minnesota game. I think we all agree that if the Niners are going to make a Super Bowl again with Kyle Shanahan as Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback, that roadmap and the way they won those 2 games is probably never happening again, right? Just him throwing no passes. That's just that never happens, guy. In both games.
Yes, no, that's not that's hard to duplicate. And just as time goes on, their defense gets more expensive. Maybe Robert Saleh's only their defensive coordinator for one more year. Just things are going to change you're probably going to need your quarterback to carry more of the
Well,
load.
look at where they're going to invest in the next year or two. Kittle's going to get a lot more money. If the Trent Williams, I don't even know if experiment feels a little too kind of loose of a term, but the Trent Williams acquisition goes well, they'll extend
Mm-hmm.
him. I got news for you, that won't be cheap. So you just start shifting some of your resources right to offense a little bit, and then you become a little more dependent on Jimmy just just improving. And it's
Yeah.
I think one word and one statement that gets thrown around in every NFL building, and I would say just football in general, in college, in the pros, is no one stays the same. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And when quarterbacks consistently get better, like part of the reason that the Atlanta Falcons had a lot of success for those couple of years, and even that next year with Sark, is Matt Ryan just kept getting better. If Jimmy gets better, like Tom Brady always got better, Peyton Manning always got better, Russell Wilson always gets better, Mahomes improves. Now, he can't improve more than likely to that level, but if he makes incremental improvements where you take dips on other parts of your team, and Kyle, I think we think is much more dynamic than the head coach he worked for in Dan Quinn. You probably put some parallels like Kubiak. Turns out Kubiak was a really good coach, right? Gary Kubiak is won a Super Bowl, is a top-notch coach. I think Kyle might even be a little more dynamic than that. You might be in pretty good shape with Jimmy as your quarterback, especially under this team-friendly deal for the next several years, right?
No question. But
Because the economics got to factor into this.
yeah, yeah. By the way, my favorite part of that 2015 year was Julio Jones had 203 targets. 203 targets that year.
That's pretty.
To get 136 catches. And to your point, yes, the finances are a big deal in part because the 49ers can basically get out of the Jimmy Garoppolo business after this year if they want to.
I do think fundamentally in this scheme and the mindset of these type coaches that you don't need a 35 million or whatever at the time is the max quarterback or even the best quarterback to have the most success. Matt Ryan was never viewed as like a top 5 talent in the league, and they went to the Super Bowl with him. Matt Schaub definitely wasn't, and I would imagine Kubiak and Kyle, when they like, should we do this trade or should we not, and they're talking about it and doing their scheme evaluation, watching them, they were probably salivating. They're like, hell yeah. And look, they started going to the playoffs all the time. They love Kirk Cousins. Kubiak was the guy that when Peyton Manning fell off a cliff was like, we can win with Brock Osweiler. I think you see it with LaFleur with Green Bay, big picture. It's like, I think we're going to be able to win with Jordan Love one day or with Goff.
Yeah.
I just think in that mindset they won at the end of Elway's career. Because you go, well, Mike Shanahan won with John Elway. Kinda. I mean, even John Elway admits we won because Terrell Davis was dominating and our defense was legit.
No question. But I think part of the LaFleur, not to get off on a tangent here, but part of the LaFleur is like, okay, what happens if a historic talent falls in your lap? Can you maximize that guy, right? And that'll be part of the question with the Packers this year.
100%. But my point is, I think these guys kind of look at it like
No doubt.
we can do a little more with less at that position. And I'm not talking about like cutting corners. They're not saying we can win the Super Bowl signing Case Keenum to a 3-year deal. But if we got Jimmy Garoppolo for $20 million basically for the next 3 years, it's going to be hard for us to do much better than that, right? We're not going to sign some big free agent quarterback because he'll be more expensive. Drafting a guy means we're taking an asset that we could use at get another wide receiver, get a corner, get a linebacker. For a quarterback, we're not going to need to do that. Like actually, Jimmy is kind of in the sweet spot of properly paid quarterbacks who still has growth potential, who you just need to kind of hammer out the to me the picks and the turnovers is.
Well,
but as you see, he's dealt with that before.
Let's look at his numbers here, and he has. And by the way, I do think the 49ers will be in the Jimmy Garoppolo business beyond this year, but it's just part of the storyline. So here's this last season for Garoppolo. You can see the completion. And part of this, John, goes back to it. Even though he had only played 8 games for Kyle Shanahan, he'd now had a full season on the team, 2 full off seasons with the 49ers coming into this year. That's what makes it different than these other 2 guys. And so you can see maybe that's part of why the numbers are where they are. In year 1, the 27 touchdowns, the interception percentage, again, almost identical to both Schaub years and the first Matt Ryan year, which is interesting. The yards per game, much further down. We're talking about, to your point, better defense on this team, so maybe less is required. And the yards per attempt higher than either of the Schaub years and between year one of Matt Ryan and year two of Matt Ryan.
And to me, the number, you'd have to do like a study on some of those like Schaub years. Jimmy's picks, like he was, there were some balls hitting some guys' hands, right, that didn't get caught. That number could have easily been in the high teens. He also, I saw a tweet the other day. The Niners were one of the top 3 teams in dropped passes last year,
As in the
over
most?
50, as in the
Wow.
most. So Jimmy Garoppolo, beside a couple other quarterbacks, for example, Ryan Tannehill, was the least amount of drops. So it shows you like the Niners have a chance that if they can just cut that by 15, the yards per game goes up a little bit, the yard per attempt goes up a little bit. Sometimes, again,
is a tip ball interception a drop, John?
I mean that's yeah, you could argue that one. My issue is that he just can play a little hero ball sometimes when I think Kyle just wants him to throw away
Yeah.
the football. And that's just something any young quarterback has to work on. It's weird because he's not like 22 years old, but he's been sitting for so goddamn long because he was the Patriots forever. Then he got hurt with the Niners. He just has, you just don't see a career like his very often. Because even Matt Schaub, for example, right, gets traded, boom, just full-time starter.
What year
right?
was he? How many years have you been in Atlanta too? When he got traded,
Who's that?
Matt Schaub. When they traded him to the Texans, how long had he been Vic's backup?
It was his third year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, Jimmy G leads the league in mental reps since this rookie season. There's no question about it. I would say when I look at his numbers, the completion percentage, if you're going to ask for more touchdowns, I don't think you can ask for a completion percentage to be at 72, 73. So I think the completion percentage is fine. I'd say, do you see a slight uptick in the touchdowns? I agree with you. The interception number is the most significant number here. Can he go from 2.7 to 1.5, a la Matt Ryan? And I again, given the defense, it doesn't need to go from both those guys were 300 yards at least in their second year. He doesn't need to be that, right? If he goes from 250 to 270 or whatever, maybe that accounts for some of the improvements. But I think the completion percentage is fine. I think if I told you this year for Jimmy Garoppolo was 69%, 29 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, would that feel like a significant, even though it's not, that would feel kind of significant to me. Single-digit picks and a few more touchdowns.
Yeah, because they're going to run the ball well, and that there are going to be certain teams they just kick the shit out of and run off the clock in the second half. Like Kyle has no problem running the ball. Literally, if they have like a 20-0 lead against the Redskins or the Giants, he will run the ball every play in the second half. Like there are no style points with him. One other thing, Guy, what skews Jimmy a little bit, there were 3 games when I think about his 2019 season that are kind of like an outlier in a good way. The Saints game when he threw 5 touchdowns, he went toe-to-toe with Drew Brees on the road. The Rams game, which at the time was kind of must-win because they had just lost to the Falcons, he made huge plays, threw for over 300 yards. And then week 17 in Seattle to win the division, 18 of 22. He was brilliant in that game on the road. That I have faith, whether his overall numbers never get to a season these next couple years like Matt Ryan's MVP year, that like in big spots, in must-win games for them against really good teams, he can do it because we just saw him do it. That's why when the argument of he shit the bed and stuff in the playoffs, I go, well, they wouldn't have been the number 1 seed down the stretch when they had all those injuries on defense and their offense needed to step it up. He was awesome.
Yeah.
Now the run game took over in the playoffs, but without Jimmy Garoppolo, that last 5 or 6 game stretch, right? They're a wild card team if he had struggled.
Yeah, so I think part of what I agree with everything you said, and I think if you only judged him on the Vikings game or the Super Bowl, you missed some of the reason they were there. To your point, I also think part of the regular season this year, part of the question is going to be, does he have the kind of year that if they've got the ball at the end of a first half in the Super Bowl and they can either sit on it or go for it, is Kyle confident enough in Jimmy Garoppolo that they start pushing the football down the field? I mean, that to me is the subtle difference. That would be the moment that I would put up against all that other stuff. As someone who defended Shanahan's actions in that moment after the fact, I understood it.
What to me, what they're looking for, they're not looking for Matt Ryan MVP because they don't necessarily need that. Not saying they wouldn't take it, but they don't need that. What I think they would want is Jimmy Garoppolo was a legitimate Pro Bowler this year. Just got invited to the Pro Bowl as like the third quarterback in the NFC with Russell Wilson and Carson Wentz. If like Jimmy Garoppolo was just, or Dak Prescott, whoever the quarterback was, and Jimmy's just not like one of those pity, the dude that makes. I'm saying like just one,
two
like
injuries and Super Bowl appearance. Yeah.
Like last year, the 3 AFC quarterbacks were the easiest picks ever. It was Mahomes, Lamar, and Deshaun Watson. It was like you just want Jimmy, like Deshaun Watson, he's just Pro Bowl quarterback.
Right.
That's to me what you want out of Jimmy. Feel good about it. And to me, you do that, or I mean, he does that this year. He just will solidify himself. So next year in the offseason, whether you lose in the first round of the playoffs or because beside winning the Super Bowl, the conversation I don't think would be that much different, right? Could they do better? You know, it's just the nature of the sport, fair or not,
and it's the nature
of his contract.
Yes, the nature of his contract. Yep.
You know, because wouldn't you say like back to Rodgers and Love? If Rodgers had one of those, like they could get out of it, the conversation would be a lot different.
Yeah. Although Aaron, there was somebody wrote that they could save $1 million next year by cutting Rodgers.
And just using the payment what you're giving Jordan Love, which isn't very much, so it equals like a certain amount.
It would still it's still a ton. It's like $31 million of dead money, but they would save 2 years after that. But that's a conversation for another video.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think about this conversation and Jimmy Garoppolo, what he needs to do to get to the next level. Down in the comments below.
Like the video.